So something weird happened yesterday, something I really wasn't expecting because it has to do with Scott Pilgrim versus the World, the game. It's something that's pretty much become the biggest example of what an all digital future could bring us on the negative side, because of course we are working towards that, it seems now, where we do see the ratio of like physical to digital sales start to be more in favor of digital, like 60-40 or 55-45 for EA. It's pretty much been talked about by all of the different companies, Microsoft, Nintendo, and Sony, as their digital sales continue to rise versus physical sales. We know the publishers want digital. I mean, Ubisoft made an entire chart to show the differences in how much money they make versus going physical, where they'd get 55% back, versus digital, where they get 70% back. Yeah, it's working that way. But Scott Pilgrim versus the World, the game, is one of the biggest examples of what happens if, say, licensing runs out or there are disputes around the game and it gets pulled down. The game came out in 2010. It was on the Xbox 360 for like the Xbox Live Arcade, and it was on the PlayStation 3 on the PlayStation Network. It was digital only, never showed up as a physical copy, which still kills me to this day that we never even had a chance to buy it physically, because while back then it definitely wasn't thought of as this game that is impossible to get or anything, because it was right there on the store, and I don't even think it was that expensive. I want to say it was like $10 or $15. See, back then, me and a bunch of friends would get together quite a bit, play different games like Halo, or even I think Mario Striker still at the time on the GameCube. But we would play Scott Pilgrim vs. the World quite a bit. It was like we'd play that and Castle Crashers, games that you can sit down with each other and play on the screen right in front of you with couch co-op. And Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, the game, was an amazing time if you had friends to play with. It really was. From what I remember, they didn't have online multiplayer initially, but later on down the road, they sold a DLC pack, which is still weird to me. I think it was like $5, but it had online multiplayer with it. Sure, they apparently locked that behind DLC. That was when DLC was still, I'd say, trying to find its place, as we just got done with the horse armor stuff, and companies were trying to see how far they could push it. But Scott Pilgrim vs. the World was eventually delisted, and I think this was in 2014, so it had like a 4-year run. And even to this day, you can, I believe, still download it, but it's pretty much predicated on the fact that you still have your Xbox 360 or your PlayStation 3 hooked up and ready to go. And we don't even know how long that will remain, because there's a pretty likely chance that as we go into the next generation with the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X, that Microsoft and Sony start to look at that 360 and that PS3 and decide if it's worth even keeping them connected to the network, or if it's time to discontinue that connection, which would effectively remove any way to get Scott Pilgrim vs. the World again. Let's say the hard drive dies on that 360 and you're like, well, I got to re-download Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. Oh, wait, I can't. Yeah, that's kind of a problem. Now people are taking to emulating the thing on their PC with RCPS3, which is the PS3 emulator, and people are passing around Scott Pilgrim vs. the World because there's literally no other way to play this thing. And that is why this whole buildup is literally to an emoji that Ubisoft did on Twitter. No, seriously, check this out. This, on Twitter, it was when Brian Lee O'Malley said, "Bring back the Scott Pilgrim game." Ubisoft wasn't tagged, from what I could see in this, which it must have popped up for them, or they actively were searching around for Scott Pilgrim. I don't know. It was very weird, because then right below that, the official Ubisoft account posted a thinking emoji, as in, maybe. Like, maybe we'll tease this a little bit here. I don't know why they would do that unless they really did have something to announce for Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, the game. It's something that we always ask for. We always talk about Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, especially when these delistings come up. We always look back at this game, and while when it came out, it was, I'd say, above average for a lot of people, and we enjoyed it, and we played it, and the movie was really hyped still at the time for some of us, not really theater goers, but eventually, of course, the movie really became like cult status for a lot of people, and it's still an awesome watch to this day. But the game at the time was like, I thought it was really, really good. It was a ton of fun. But now we look back on it and we're like, man, it would really be great to have Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, the game, to play right now. I mean, the gameplay was solid. The soundtrack was, like, legitimately one of the best soundtracks of that generation. It was done by Anamanaguchi, and it had, like, this chiptune theme to it. It was just really well done. Like, if you go and listen to it on YouTube now, it is like legitimate music you can just hang out and listen to. It's one of those type of video game soundtracks. But if Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, the game, really does come back, Ubisoft maybe has something lined up for an announcement, whether they just drop it on Twitter, or what if they put it at their Ubisoft Forward event, where, of course, they're going to talk about things like Assassin's Creed and Watch Dogs and Gods and Monsters and probably Far Cry. But what if we're watching that and all of a sudden the chiptune music pops in, super familiar Scott Pilgrim music, and all of a sudden they're like, hey, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, the game, is back, licensing all figured out, because I think they have, what, Universal and some other, I'm sure there's quite a few people who want some money out of this if it does happen, and then boom, it's on all platforms, and you can go get it now, or like a shadow drop, or maybe, you know, it takes a few weeks to get out. But if that thing hit the eShop on the Switch, it would immediately jump, I would say anyway, to one of the top 3 games, because Minecraft, I think, is always up there and a few others, but it would definitely jump into like the top 3 or top 5 games on the eShop for download games, like immediately, instantly. It is a perfect game for the Switch, by the way, with the split Joy-Cons and the kind of the couch co-op you can do, but that thing needs to go everywhere, and they have to do a physical copy. You got to give me a shot at a physical copy of this thing, so if that means Limited Run Games has to come in and do it, fine. I will buy it twice if I have to. Like, I'll buy it digitally, and then if the physical copy is like months off or something, I'll buy it physically, okay, down the road, because we've seen what happens with this thing. You might as well preserve it. You know what's really amazing about this situation? Just that emoji from Ubisoft, just that acknowledgement towards Scott Pilgrim versus the World made Scott Pilgrim trend on Twitter. Seriously, just that emoji and that little bit of acknowledgement from Ubisoft, like, maybe that Scott Pilgrim game would do well. Maybe it's worth bringing back. Yeah, it is. In fact, I put the tweet out and I said, hey, we're going to try to will this thing into existence. The tweet is out there. The gauntlet's been thrown down, okay? We're going to take a shot at this. Here's hoping that their forward event brings something other than just the basics with Assassin's Creed and all of that. Throw something crazy in there like Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, the game. It might sound strange to some people, but trust me when I say, if this thing is announced, it will blow up online. It will be a really big deal that day, and people will be talking about that maybe even more, believe it or not, than something like Watch Dogs. If they're both announced the same day, it might be like that. And if they do it, you know, add in the DLC, the online multiplayer, do all of this stuff, put it everywhere, Steam, Switch, PlayStation, Xbox, everywhere you can, cell phones, doesn't matter. And let's get Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, the game, back. I'm hoping Ubisoft isn't doing this just to do it. I don't know. I'm seriously trying to figure out why they would do it, other than, hey, yeah, we're doing this and we're kind of laying the groundwork and setting some hype up, or they're setting up disappointment. That'd be bad. But let me know what you guys think about this one down below. Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, the game, being teased, something of legend at this point. Even though it came out in 2010, it was on the market for 4 years. People bring it up all the time. It really does have legendary status for the beat-em-up community at this point, or the Scott Pilgrim vs. the World fandom. Yeah, so we'll see. Hey, not too much longer until Ubisoft's event, or maybe just a shadow drop on Twitter. Thanks so much for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.